Howdy folks, welcome to another edition of the Scannell Agenda. I'm Stephen J. F. Scannell, and this is my lovely wife, Pam.
Thank you.
And we just did a show, Prayer and Pizza, didn't we, honey?
Mm-hmm.
It came out really good.
Come out really good.
Okay, this show for the Scannell Agenda is entitled Hot Mold Autoclave. This is show number 105. Today's date is Monday, April 8th, 2019. So what I'm doing here is I'm working on the Marine Technologies educational program. That entails boat building. So that's one of my trades from a long time ago, is boat building. We built some great boats on Nantucket. Before that, I was a welder on the ships at the General Dynamics yard in Quincy, or Four River Yard there, they call it. The boat building thing is my roots there with the Nantucket, building a beautiful wooden boat. So I don't see how you could get any better than that. So these are top-of-the-line boats that we built on Nantucket. And I worked on 2 different crews doing that. So over the years, I've always had that interest in reading Wooden Boat magazine pretty much every...
I enjoy it too.
Yeah, and I like to read to Pam.
Yes.
And she's interested too.
It's nice.
So it's a nice interest for a couple.
Yeah.
And it's such a nice interest for anybody, really, kids, you know, sailing and boating and fishing. It's such a great interest, as we all know here on the Cape.
Right.
So what better location, you know, who, what, where, when, and why. This is the where, Cape Cod. And incidentally, as an aside, we love that Delmarva Peninsula, don't we? Delaware,
very
Maryland,
nice.
And Virginia. That peninsula
a lot of
over
open
there.
space, cows. It's really nice.
And tell about you gave one of these shells.
Oh yeah, to the lady at the Welcome Center, and she was so pleased. There was, I think, 4 of the people there, and they were just ecstatic about it. They loved the shell.
Yeah, she was tickled to get it, huh?
And the shell is varnished. It's probably one that me and Steve did, more than likely, and it's from Nantucket.
Yeah. So I'm going to try to pry this one open. Let's see, dark side up. And this is all kind of varnished together. It has an elastic hinge. You hear it cracking. Oh, that was easy. Now, can you slowly open this up, honey?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, just keep going there. Open that right up, and then rip it off. And then we'll show how these 2 shells, these are matching pairs. This is one scallop. We'll see how they nest together. This is when we go scalloping, and when we shuck them, we nest them together like that, see? Now that's 2 shells. All right, that's 2 shells, and they nest like that. And then that's where the process, a big long line of these scallop shells. But anyway, I wanted to illustrate how boats can nest together too. And as kids, we used to float these scallops and see how long they would float.
Oh.
Okay, so nesting the boats to go into the autoclave. That's what we're going to be doing, hopefully, with this big, huge production of the Marine Technologies educational program. Now, the reason we have to have the autoclave is because with a hot mold process, you're infusing or injecting plastic into the wood itself, which can make the wood heavier. And you can try to boil that out. And in my process design work, it can be, plastic can be waterlogged, let's say, into the wood, and then you can boil that plastic out if you need to have lightweight wood. So I did mention that the boats would be heavy. You know, the hull would be heavy if it were infused with plastic. But that's not necessarily true, because you can boil out the plastic after it's been pressure treated with the, let's just say, I like to use high density polyethylene as the resin, but I'm not sure that would be the resin, but it might be. Now, if you can picture a big oil tank with a huge amount of gallonage of the plastic, and then you can picture perhaps several boats of different sizes being nested one in the other, in the other, in the other, and these would be going into a, let's say, an autoclave. That's just a rough concept which depicts a couple of the different working parts with the fireboxes and the cap and the pressurization of the plastic into the wood. Now, if you send a 2x4 down 600 feet into the ocean and bring it up, it will be very heavy because it will be totally saturated with water. Now, with nesting Illyrians, let's say an Illyrian is 26 feet, you would then have different sizes. You'd have a 26 foot and then add 5.5, that would be 31. You don't have to write that down, hon. 31.5 foot Illyrian. And then you'd have a 37 foot Illyrian, and then a 42 foot, 42.5 foot Illyrian, and then a 48 foot Illyrian, and then a 53.5 foot Illyrian, and then a 59 foot Illyrian. Now, if you wanted to stop there, that would be okay. But if you add 11 feet, then you'd get 70, and then an 81 footer, and then a 92 footer. You know, and you can keep going, but the limitation is you'd have to have a pretty big autoclave. So I thought 59 foot would be a good stopping point, but maybe I'm wrong. Now, the autoclave can be used to pressure treat wood of all different types. You could be building a wooden box or a West System wooden box for the house of a boat. So it could be boat parts, not just the hulls. It could be boat decks, and it would be boat decks if you're not using aluminum. I prefer aluminum, but that's just an aside. Designers will have their way here, not me. I'm a brainstormer, okay? So let's say you're building a mobile home unit, like a trailer. And you can see these trailers out there that are pretty much going for chump change because the wood in them, that's the way to build them, out of wood, but the wood rots. So with this building method, your wood would never rot. So that would be a huge boom for the long-term economy, because we build these things and they rot out and then you got to build them again. Maybe that in and of itself is not a great example, but the value you would be purchasing would be increased, let's just say. So for a boat, you know, if you're chasing after maintenance on a boat, number one, that costs a lot of money. Number two, I've always thought that the plank on frame building of a boat is just you're building a disaster that's waiting to happen. Now, a lot of people happen to love this method because it is traditional. Now, with the hut molding, you can use every single plank that is in your boat can be cut and custom cut, every single plank, and laid up. And that can be 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 layers of wood. Now, these planks would be probably perforated, and then you could either staple them and or hot glue them. You know, you can do any number of things. And then, as they go into the autoclave, you want to put a coat of fiberglass on them, perhaps. I'm not sure how this would all pan out, but I think it could be done that your shops, let's say all around the country, could be building these hulls and parts. And then they would get shipped to the autoclave to be pressure treated with the plastic. So, okay, why go through the bother of having an autoclave and hot mold system? Well, we know the history of hot molding, and we know it works. The Ludders boat company built a fine little sailboat, and it was hot molded, and it was wheeled into an autoclave that is just a pressurized chamber that got very, very hot, and that's how they infused plastic into the wood of these hulls that are still working sailboats right now. And they still have a market. Now, most boats that were built in that era that were wood have either been sawed up for firewood or they got preserved. And the preservation of a wooden boat over the years that is a plank on frame boat just takes, you hate the word forever, but it's just so much money and time and effort to tear apart a boat and
I
rebuild
don't
it.
hate the word forever. I just know forever's coming, so I usually jump in.
Yeah. So I thought that the best way to fiberglass one of these hulls, which would not have any glue on it at all, would be to use some good epoxy on the outside layer of the wood only. And this would not be done by your disabled people, most likely. It would be done by technicians that have positive pressure masks on and that know how to do fiberglass work and work with the chemicals. So before you pop the boat off the mold and a truck takes it away, you'd fiberglass it. And so you've got epoxy on the wood, which is saturated into the wood, and then you've got your Cabosil as a filler, and then you've got perhaps 5200, which is a 3M product, marine sealant. Anybody that works on fishing boats or on boats in general knows about 3M 5200. I've mentioned it on this program before. It's kind of like a miracle rubberized product that just won't give up. And so you put your glass into this very wet 5200 marine sealant, and it's kind of goopy and messy. And then you wet out the fiberglass, or you wet it out first. I'm not sure about how this would go. And then you do a glass job on the wooden hull. Then you put it in the autoclave and you pressurize it with this basically soft plastic. So you'd have a very hard shell on the outside. It would be a fiberglass shell. I think this hull would last for many, many, many years with very little maintenance involved. Now, we've come a ways with fiberglass technologies, with West System technologies, and all this stuff. So the autoclave process, however, has not really come that far as I know, especially with boats. So there I go again, as Reagan would say, there you go again. I'm designing something and depending on a technology either to come up or to be bumped up somehow to meet the design criteria. And the design criteria is that disabled people, kids, and grandparents are going to have fun building these hulls and building these parts because there's no glue involved. There's no methyl ethyl ketone peroxide that's going to put you in the hospital and give you cancer. It's just wood and nails or staples. So that's beautiful. Okay, that's how the hulls and the parts are going to get built, I would think, if we were to go with the ideal. And so the glass skin process is that we use a dry hull and we dry it out for 2 months and we have a very dry hull. And then we have 5 saturation coats of epoxy, probably maybe West System or some other epoxy. And then we have a filler. These are 5 successive coats with a filler. And then we lay on the lightweight glass, or we do the 5200, and then, you know, I'm not sure exactly how this is going to work. There's several different ways of doing it. And then you'd be manually sanding the hull with sanding boards, fairing it just enough so that it's not too rough, 36 grit with a sanding belt. And then you're going to roll the glass into the 5200, and then you're going to end up with a nice fab mat that's bonded to this rubberized glue called 5200. And then, so there are several ways that this is going to work out. That's that. So that's the nesting part. All these different size boats go into the autoclave. The autoclave itself is a fun thing to design. If you're thinking about a small pressure cooker with regulated pressure, that might be a good way to think about the autoclave. So the glass skin, well, you're going to say, how's the plastic going to get through the glass skin? Well, obviously it's not going to penetrate the glass. It's going to come in from inside the hull. And the planks may be, let's say, 5/16 of an inch by an inch or an inch and a half, or some variation thereof. Then the plastic soaks in from the inside through tiny holes, and then the cracks in the planks. You might have spacers. So, and then the hull could be in the autoclave for as much as a month, let's say, just soaking up the plastic. And then what you're going to be doing is varying the pressure of the plastic that gets into the wood. And that should squeeze out any air bubbles, or voids as we call them. So this is the Illyrian 26 side to side in the hot mold, and this is like a Lego fastening system, whereby the hulls come to a certain factory that does this. Could be on the Delmarva Peninsula, and it could be on Cape Cod, and it could be in Georgia and Texas and California, etc. You know, different parts of the country. You'd want this to be a nationwide program, but you need to pilot first. You need to do the piloting. So these are the Illyrian 26 hulls that are connected, let's say, not nested, but one to the other, because they're equal. And then there would be a rack of, let's say, 15 of these hulls, or there are actually a hull on top and a hull facing it on bottom. So that would be 3 sets of 10. That's 30 hulls going in to get pressure treated with the plastic, with the nice safe plastic, which is high density polyethylene. And you see it all the time. It's that black plastic that they use for construction and pipage, with the ribs in it. It's pretty tough stuff. So you're infusing all that plastic into the wood. And you wouldn't end up with extra plastic on the outside unless you wanted it, and you could spray that on. Now, there may be some compromises to the wooden boat lore and legend and all the aficionados that love wooden boats. So we may be able to do a transom door that might be fiberglass, and that horrifies people. Oh, it's not a wooden boat. Well, you know, you got to have compromises here. You got to be able to wheel people in and out of these boats. So we need to build a hull with no risky and stinky and expensive epoxies, and that's built by disabled people, clubhouse people. Let's say, what's that nice program with the farm down there near 6A?
Oh, capabilities?
Capabilities. Could be building these. This could be a regular job for a guy or a gal building these hulls.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you like to put wood together with a nail gun or hammer and nail or a
Could
staple
call the
gun.
director of capabilities, Fran,
Yeah.
and get him on it.
Okay. The hulls may then be glassed. Now, it's important to note that these would be standardized hulls and that every hull would be eventually put in the water to sail in a class against itself. So if you were sailing in one boat and I was sailing in the other and we were in a race, our boats would be equal. That's called class of a boat. So this is the way it's done in the Olympics, and it's the way it's done in yacht clubs. So it has to be a good design for a class sailboat. And I'm using the Illyrian class sloop by Sanford Boat Company as the kind of the base model. And when I say we could put a transom in there for fiberglass, well, this may be turned out to be a 29-footer, not a 26-footer, because you need a little extra room to run charters with a transom door that can wheel in at least one wheelchair, let's say. 2 would be more ideal. So the big deal is that we, the disabled people, are going to be building these hulls and parts. We couldn't do it if it were a standardized West system hull, wood epoxy saturation technique, unless you've got disabled people wearing all these big positive pressure masks, so that you, and that's a possibility too, okay? Just dress people up in all the safety gear. So I shouldn't discount that. That could happen if we don't want to go this hot mold route. But, okay. So I have this my usual method is to take it to an extremely large operation. So I have railways here with a humongous railway going into a humongous, looks like about 100 million gallons of this plastic, this hot plastic, where these boats would go in, or parts would go into this ridiculously big autoclave. Now, you never know, someday we may get to that point. And here is a design for a 37-foot Illyrian with several doodads and compromises, such as boomkin and pulpit, and it's a ketch. So I think I'd be straightened out really quick, 5 minutes, by anybody that knew their stuff with the boats. But what I'm trying to achieve here, you see, is charter ability of a boat. And I'm using as a model some of the boats in Hyannis that take out passengers for a little sailboat ride. And you see them, and they're all sitting on...
Doesn't the pirate do that too?
Yeah, but that's not a sailboat.
Oh, it's not a sailboat.
So see this picture with the sailboat and see the person sitting on the house, they're sitting outside. But this is rather a small boat, and then you've got people sitting in here, which I don't have that drawn. But these are considerations for chartering, which may not suffice for the yacht club, but maybe the yacht club could use that boat as well, you know. As long as all the boats are the same, you're going to have these boats designed to be compromised vessels. In other words, if it were just one boat doing yacht club racing, that would be one thing, and that's a possibility. They may want their own design just for the yacht clubs, just to do racing, and that's it. You store them for the winter. But with this genre of design, which is multi-use, you're going to be fishing. You're probably going to be bay scalloping with these sailboats, and you're probably going to be doing a little sword fishing and cod fishing, or what have you. So you got to fill in some of the different seasons using these boats. And this is all tourist-based fishing, by the way. So these are wooden hulls, and then they have, let's say, a glass keel, a fiberglass keel. Now the fiberglass solid keel would be then filled economically, I would think, not with the expense of lead, but perhaps with very heavy cement that has iron ore. And that may be able to fit batteries into the iron ore. That would be battery sleeves so that you can fit several batteries that will run your auxiliary power. Because if we're putting kids in these boats, they want to be right. They want to have the electronics. They want to have the auxiliary power. These are training vessels, and so you want every aspect of the training to be involved. When we're talking about marine technologies educational program, we're talking about kids and college kids using these boats and making money with these boats. And for the disabled people, building the boats will be a big deal nationwide. And now if you've got a boat shop, you can also make artificial reef gear too. So there's a lot that plugs into this. It's not just building boats. This artificial reef gear applies to the fisheries aspects of windmill construction, inshore and offshore windmills. It's just poppycock that fishermen would protest windmills offshore, by the way, because they're not thinking of constructing artificial reefs within this parameter. So I got 1 more minute to wrap it up. So that's it. It's got fiberglass keels that screw in and are bonded in. Now here's a picture of a mold that tilts, and you've got people working on an Alarian 26 or 29 or what have you, and the mold tilts so that you can have access to it. And this is these molds used as spacers so that they can have easy pressure treating in the autoclave. Okay, well, wasn't that a bunch of crazy talk, huh? As usual.
No.
Okay.
And I'll just add to that Dan, my baby brother, said, I guess I said at first that Steve's a genius, and he said, I know that, and he surprised me.
Isn't that lovely?
I was like, wow.
Okay, enough of that. Now we're really getting deep. As I say, put your boots on, right? Okay, that's the Scannell agenda. Thanks for watching.